All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first ever, the premiere of the Controversial Exchange. This has been over a year in the making. I am so excited. The goal here is that we're going to bring to you a beginning to the tougher conversations about human behavior. That is our tagline. Remember that. A beginning to the tougher conversations in human behavior. My name is Ryan O. I am the co-host producer of this show, and I have a co-host named Dimitri who we will meet on this episode. Fantastic gentleman. We talk about why we want to start this, where we see it going, and you get to learn a little bit about us each personally before we really get going and just crank the knobs on this. And just real quick, in case you didn't know, this is part of like an extension of the Daily BA. The Daily BA is a video series, essentially video blog, video site that I started about a year ago. It is primarily housed on YouTube. It is also on Facebook. You can see it on a lot of other platforms. It is at the Daily BA. If you are interested, that's at THEDAILYBA on all social media platforms. And it's partially supported by people who support me on Patreon. Now, Patreon is this really cool site where it is a values-based system. I'll tell you about it all later. But it's a way to kind of help donate and make this project even better and provide people additional value that support as well. Now, one of the things that I'm extremely excited about in this is that you, the listener, will be able to be a part of this experience. There is this app called Anchor FM. Anchor.fm is the website if you want to go check it out. And it allows you to interact and call in and share your thoughts, give us questions. This can be anonymous or you can submit it. We can even choose to air these if we want to as well, and if you're into that idea. All you have to do is download the purple little app called Anchor. You can search for it. It's on all devices. It's really been taking the internet by storm when it comes to podcasting. It has this little cool logo that looks like a podcast symbol with an anchor kind of like set sideways. Open that up. Make sure that you type in the Controversial Exchange. We have a peachish kind of logo, just simple white and black text. And you can make a profile that can be anonymous, or you can call in with your own name. You can state whether or not you still want that to be aired publicly or responded to privately. Again, totally up to you. Just make sure you're not stating your personal identifying information. And if you choose to submit anonymously, that you're just putting in parentheses private when you submit it. It's that simple. We will be providing teasers on Anchor only. So if you want to know what those are and contribute any questions, ideas before we jump on, that is where you will have to find those. I cannot do that on other platforms. You have to go to anchor.fm/the Controversial Exchange. All right, let's jump into the show.
For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's done for you. For the record, lab on me going all the way.
Welcome to the first ever introductory episode of the Controversial Exchange. We have some journey in front of us. We're going to figure out where it goes. I'm super stoked. If you are tuning in as a Patreon supporter, welcome to the video stream. How you doing? We're diving in straight into who we are, what we want to do, just kind of setting the foundations for what this podcast is aiming to achieve, cover. So let's start with Dimitri. What's up? How you doing?
Nice to see you, man.
Good to see you. So
this is we're rocking and rolling here. Where should we start? Should we just start with who we are, what we do, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, let's start with let's give a little bit of background to how we met, and then we can dive into our personal histories maybe. How's that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. So we met two and a half years ago now, right? Or a year and a half ago?
Year and a half, I think, technically.
A year and a half ago at the conference at Haskell Learning Center. Shout out to Dr. Morton Humlin, the man, the legend. But
yeah,
we just kind of kicked off, right? We just kind of, like minds, had a good time kind of talking behavior stuff, behavior philosophy, state of the field. You had some pretty interesting ideas at that time about going and doing your own YouTube thing. We kind of bonded over Gary Vee.
Yeah. Shout out to Gary Vee. I know he's definitely not listening to this.
Not even for 4 seconds. And, it's just been we both kind of talked, and I wanted to do a podcast forever. And you were talking about that YouTube channel thing, and it's just something that I never really followed through with. It was on my list, but I never really had the courage, I think, maybe, or the follow through, the will to get it done. And this opportunity came around the next time we saw each other, which was at the most recent conference at HLC.
Yeah.
And, it was like, hey man, let's do this thing. And I was like, that sounds like a really fun thing to do. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Here we
Yeah.
are.
I don't know where exactly where I picked this up from, but I've always done this thing where it's like you talk and you get to know somebody, and if you get this sense of like, ooh, they might be like in this, we might have similar goals or the same values or the same directions that we're looking to go, then like spend a little bit more time there, but don't rush it. Like I think a lot of people too quickly rush and they're like, hey, we should look at collaborating, and I'd rather. That was kind of yeah, like what happened when we start to talk about Gary Vee a little bit, and like we're both into this new media. I remember talking about the Joe Rogan podcast briefly. And you were the one that kind of turned me on to like, I should probably listen to that more because I'm driving with this dude and the other things he has to say. So I should really look into some of the resources that he's digging into. So,
Was the biggest thing was like identifying the need and the thing that's missing, or, and I don't want to say missing, but I mean the thing that would be a cool, interesting way to look at behavior stuff, talk about it, and inject some of our points of view in the community that aren't, a little bit more hyperbolic or short, quick spurts. Long form discussion.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, the video component is what I was contemplating when I first met you, and it was just like, hey man, this Gary Vee dude. I remember describing things that Gary Vee talks about, and then you were like, "Have you ever seen Gary Vee?" And I was like, "That's my boy. Like that's what I've been watching. That's what I've been consuming." But the what that's turned into is, I mean, it's pretty like obviously like out there and duh. But anything controversial in nature starts to get more clicks and views. That's not the point of this. The point that is leverage, obviously, in the title with the controversial exchange. But the goal here was to start having a place, a home for the more controversial things in our field that people are not talking about publicly, but they are more than willing to talk about behind the scenes in a text, at the bar, at conferences, and see if we can't create a home for those, and a home in the sense of like a starting ground. I would be stoked if some things were highlighted and then there was a little bit more of a discussion going on in the field. By no means does that mean that, credit needs to be here. As people will find, a lot of times we're going to be tackling topics that have been talked about in this field for 40 or 50 years. The goal is to put them in a new medium and kind of also, I guess, orient people to some of the different perspectives when it comes to these different topics. So I think that's go ahead.
About what, but I mean that, just to elaborate on that as far as like why it's an inspiration and why that matters is because when we start talking about how we talk behind closed doors about things, how we talk about it at a bar, how we talk about it just casually at lunchtime or dinner time or whatever,
Yeah.
there isn't anyone around. We don't have clients around. We don't have supervisors around. We don't have, whatever vested stakeholders around that we can let our hair down and really have a conversation about how we feel about things. It highlights the fact that the discussions have been the same for so long. The discussion kind of feels tired. And at some point in time, like sunshine is the best disinfectant, and new media seems to be a good opportunity to put it out there in such a way where rather than have it hidden in some journal article, like, that Richard Fox article we read that basically is saying the same things that so many people say now in 1996, or if you go and read the first couple chapters of Science of Human Behavior, which is, from 1953,
Yeah.
like, holy shit, is this for today?
Yeah.
That's 70 years ago, or whatever. And so I think that at some point in time, it would be nice to get people to let their hair down and start having those honest, raw conversations where, we're not afraid of what our public image would look like, or we're not afraid about what, others might think, because the truth is the best opportunity for us to make the changes that we want to see in the field and in life, really. So that for me, it's an opportunity to have honest conversation that's unguarded and intended to better the field in that way.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's great, man. We have some like, I guess our backbone then is like behavior analysis and honesty. How'd you describe it? Radical honesty. I remember you saying that one time. Radical honesty. So that's the goal. Those are the things that are going to be prioritized, right? When it comes to maybe someone submits an idea or they want to jump onto the show, like radical honesty, a demonstration of those sort of things. In your current repertoire of someone, will definitely help influence us on trying to invite people on. So yeah,
one thing that we do not intend the podcast to be, I don't intend to be, at least, is to be a full tilt informative science podcast. That's really not the point.
Yep. Yeah. And so
that's a different, go to the literature for that.
Yep.
come for a little bit more of an op-ed, right? A little bit more of philosophy, a little bit more of point of view, a little bit more interpretation, and those things. That's a little bit of a difference where, you know, we might not be exactly 100% precise 100% of the time. It might not be perfect in its conceptualization, but the intent and the overarching idea that we're trying to express and come across for the purpose of the discussion is going to be the important centerpiece of it. That's not to say that we won't fact check ourselves. That will be a thing that we will do to the best of our ability, but that's to say that's not the intention of this.
I dig. And if anyone's looking for those things, they're not aware of them, there's a few different podcasts out there. We started up one a few years ago called Why We Do What We Do. It is for a general, easy to consume sort of psychological topics. You're going to get it from a behavioral perspective, but you're not going to get the technical language. So we're trying to keep those distinctly clear. It's at like 86 episodes. I just published 86 today. Probably 90 by the time it's out. Yeah.
Most podcasts fail by the time they make 10.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy. I got to give a shout out to the OG Math Sakura. We will not be technical. We will not be highlighting things like he's talking about. He's my homie. I appreciate him. I look up to him, and I want to make sure that there's always a distinct line there. I actually pitched this idea to him about 9 months ago before we hit record. So if you're looking for what you were describing beforehand, there's that there. And there's a couple other podcasts that are out there as well in the behavior analysis sphere. So yeah, this will be distinct and different in those ways. And then while I'm on it, just roll into, this was meant as a podcast like extension of the Daily BA channel. So that's the daily video arm of, I guess, what's now part of my business and part of what I try to do. I'm really interested in storytelling. How do you tell stories and get those things out there? When it comes to mediums, you've got visual, written, and your audio are kind of your main pillars. And there was always an intent to test out and see how the video went and then maybe add an audio component onto this. So that's what that is. I'm not paid to say certain things, but I guess the important thing here is that there is a little bit of financial backing by people that support the channel. And that's just a way for me to give more value at the end of the day and give them things like the video components I talked about earlier. So yeah, I think that kind of sets the stage for who we are and who we aren't when it comes to podcasting and behavior analysis. The backbone being behavior analysis and radical honesty, and op-ed, I guess, would be kind of those pillars.
Is a fair categorization. Science, op-ed. How about a little bit about who we are, man? I know that you get through the Daily BA, you get to tell people a lot of who you are, but in terms of the less the persona and more just the person, how do you see yourself approaching our conversations that you think we're going to have here? How do you think it's going to be, like, where are you going to be coming from?
So,
what brought you to this point, kind of like professionally, emotionally, personally?
For sure, there's a lot there. Kind of a quick thing before we get into too much is when it comes to video, I've learned like a well-crafted video it's not scripted in the sense of it's fake, but it is going to be completely planned and pre-programmed, right? If you're looking to really do something effectively. And in some of the adventures of running around and filming, kind of creating some like interviews and other pieces with other folks, they realize like, oh, this seems almost like scripted. And it's like, it is if you're looking to actually intentionally do something. We know that from, it's surprising at first, but it's not surprising when you look at traditional media, TV and, you know, the shitty shows that are out there. But when you're starting to think of how we program behavior analysis and try to influence behavior change, right? That is something that we take complete control over, trying to program and say what's going to happen. So this was meant to be the much more open, raw, honest without that. I had one that was like, what is applied behavior analysis? And it was supposed to be you're trying to cover applied behavior analysis in a minute, is what I was trying to achieve on that video. And it was about 6 minutes of filming that was chopped into 1 minute that makes it look as if I said something exactly in 1 minute perfectly, right? But that's where a good video is edited to the point where you are, in a sense, kind of creating, not only you're crafting and sending your message out there, but you're also making sure you have control over what that flow is, right? And how that goes. And you can't do that in a long form podcast as much. And the goal there, or the intention there, is that you get more different value out of both types. people, I would say. So there's a side to me that my close colleagues know, that the folks that I've grown up and been mentored with in the field, which I do want to shout out at some point on this, they know me for those sort of things. But if you know me just strictly from the videos, you're going to get a totally different picture of like who I am and what I'm about. Because I am glad. I mean, I think I told you before we went on air, like I spent like 7 hours last night at drinking some bourbon, hanging out, talking about behavior analysis in a very free flow. No one was, drunk or anything like that, but it was just like a very free flow conversational back and forth for 7 hours. Like you'll never get that from me if you look at the videos, right? Or if you look at any of the comment sections or a website. So in a sense, like I don't feel like I'm painting a honest enough picture with myself in just one medium. So I'm excited to do that, but it's not to, I don't know, like it's not for limelight or anything like that. It's just content creation's become fun, and I'm missing a side of me, and I'm thinking this audio form will dive into that as well as others. So
it's not simply attention-seeking behavior, like you actually somehow automatically reinforce it too. It's just it's sheer joy.
Yeah.
Love of the game, bro. It's called love of the game. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You're allowed to have love of the game. And that's when you know that it's not work anymore too. And that's kind of the thing, is that for a lot of us, at least for me too, behavior analysis has been my job for so many years, but it's also my passion. And when you only get to exercise your passion in the form of a job, it starts to become a grind. And, I see this as an opportunity to take my skill set and apply it a little bit differently a couple times a week, where, we get to just talk for funsies about the more abstract things that are eating at us, or some of the hot topics that seem to be going around that don't seem to make sense, or don't seem to have a clear-cut answer to them, or don't seem to have a fair representational weight on each side of the opinion, or each side of the discussion too, right?
Yeah.
So, giving that some limelight and that chance to kind of air that stuff and be out there and have that conversation, and hopefully stimulate it in others as just some random guy living in Columbus, Ohio, that with an internet connection, you know what I mean? So that's where I'm at on this thing, and I'm looking forward to it dramatically, because I'm looking forward to do this for a long time.
While I'm thinking about it, some of the things that we've got in the hopper for folks is the goal would be to tackle things that are talked about in the field of behavior analysis and offer the various different perspectives. That will include inviting people onto this podcast. So you will see folks invited on. Like I said, the door's open to people that want to actually demonstrate the radical honesty and like tackle something. I've got 4 or 5 guests in the hopper already. We're going to kind of tease those and keep you guessing, but we've got some big folks, and we've got some folks that are extremely good practitioners and, quote, not like known in that sense, but just awesome, badass people. And that is always how I've operated, is we respect the work that you've put in, not necessarily your letters, your stature, your pubs, and those sort of things. Those are all earned, and it's more so what have you earned, and can you talk about this topic in that kind of honest sense. So yeah, it'll be fun. I want to dive into like topics like functional analysis versus the ISCA, right? I want to dive into topics like the growth rates that we see in our field, and the certification, different perspectives on certification, right? Of us being the only like real professional field with a high school certificate in this human services world. Like, what is that? Because there's different perspectives there. Talking about, do we actually deserve to branch outside of autism and like work in different areas? So I don't know. I know we've got a list. I don't know if you want to throw any more out there, but I'm pretty stoked.
Our versus the applied setting, I think, and like basic versus translational research and how that plays out. I think that's going to be a piece of it. I think we're going to, overall, we originally had planned an episode on behaviorism versus cognitivism, but I think the reality of that is that it's going to be a running theme throughout a lot of our discussions. I think the RFT-VB divide is going to...
Ooh, I'm excited for that one. Yeah, and the goal there isn't to like beat a dead horse. It's to add some different perspectives in too. Like maybe none of them are right. So it should be fun.
The one thing to point out, this is not about just shit stirring.
Yeah.
Not like, it's more just like, you can never find a concentrated a concentrated article or a specific resource that has everything all laid out for you, with the exception of the RFT one. There's actually their published article called Distillation of the RFT Controversy, which has like all the different summaries of all the different back and forths of it through the years. But that's the thing. And also from regular people's point of view too, not just the high-end giants of our field, titans colliding, more like how regular people view each one of those things and where it is. Because I have a feeling that a lot more of the common sense will reign out as far and middle of the road kind of discussion. And if people don't know, then too, that might be an opportunity to open up their eyes to some new stuff they should read and check out.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So I was going to say, let's shift gears and let's dive into each other's history. Let's give a little bit. I don't remember exactly what you asked me before, but I can start to describe, like, I guess a transition, like a little bit of my history and like how I even got in the field. That's probably a good thing for us to each dive into. Yeah. So real simple, I guess, like born and raised in a really small town in central Nevada. I'm talking about 2,500 people live there. There's 120 people in my high school. 60 of those people were bussed in from 5 smaller towns. So we were the big dogs. We were the folks that were like, you're coming into our town, right? And it was very conservative, very good for like instilling good traditional values. Like I ate dinner around the dinner table until I was 17 with my family every night. Like that was a thing that we basically always did. Good, hardworking, like put your boots on and gloves on and like go out and work. I was raised in like use your hands, build stuff, help out around the house. My dad and I like rebuilt our I did all the manual labor and like followed directions, right? But we rebuilt our house for like 8 years or something crazy like that. And it was like that sort of lifestyle, I guess, that I was a part of. And I had to create my own fun. Like there was no movie theaters. There was no bowling alley. There was no mall. There was nothing that most people were used to. We got like dial up and like, I don't know, like 2001 or something crazy like that, or 1999. I don't know. Like we were behind the curve on everything. There was literally trends of like what was fashionable would show up 2 to 3 years later in our town. And that was consistent. So it was great. I got into basketball. I got into guitar. It was just like video games. Oh my God, did I play some video games? And it was just, create your own fun. And I think a lot of people do that, but I just like to lay out there like how different it was in my upbringing. And so I was taught my dad was like, you need to use his thing was like, use your brain, use your skill sets, use those over your body. Cause he was a manual labor iron worker. And he's saying, if you, I remember him saying like, look at all the wrinkles on my face. You know, he's like 45 and he's all wrinkly. He's been on the sun for basically 25 straight years. And he's like, go, you know, like he worked his ass off with my mom as well to be able to put us in a situation where we could go to college. Whereas he didn't quite have that opportunity. He had to earn those, like straight up roll up his sleeve and earn that sort of stuff. So I'm definitely fortunate in that situation to where like we went from, like I would say like a lower middle class family to an upper middle class family because of their hard work over my upbringing up until I was 18 years old. The way out of Tonopah, you either stayed, and there were some great jobs there. It was one of those things where you're going to work for like the test site, like good old Area 51 and that sort of stuff. You're going to work for a gold mine, or you're going to work for the county or state and some sort of service program like that if you want to have a decent job. Outside of that, there was other supporting jobs there, but like I'm just telling people like low income rent was like $150 a month. Like a good place for rent was like $300 a month. Like it was a very different lifestyle than a lot of people are probably used to. The closest town and now hospital was 200 miles away. Just very different. So if you wanted to get out, college was one of the ways. You either went to Reno or you went to Las Vegas. My mom's like, there is no way in hell that you're going to Las Vegas. There's way too much vice and sin that is involved with that town. Little did she know that all that's up in Reno as well.
The world's biggest little city.
Yeah. We have some of the highest per capita rates when it comes like sex trafficking and other illicit drugs and stuff like that are going on because of just where we are geographically. But Besides the point, the thing was I found myself showing up in Reno because I was too engulfed in basketball at the time. My mom was like, "There's no way he's going to Vegas," so she actually applied me for undergraduate in Reno, and got me into there. So when I finished with high school basketball, she's like, "So what's next?" I remember going like, "I got to figure out what to do. Like, do I get a job?" And she's like, "I applied you to school," and I was like, "That's good," because like I missed the deadlines. I was too focused on that, and that's how I ended up at the University of Nevada, Reno. First semester was a psychology class. It was super interesting. The only one that was actually interesting. I was thinking about pre-med before then. So I went back and I was like, hey, by the way, parents, like I lost a scholarship. I can probably earn it back next semester. And like, I'm not thinking pre-med anymore. I'm thinking psychology. And I remember my dad going, psychology? Like, what is this? But yeah, man, I stumbled into a behavior analysis class purely by accident. It was the next one after Psych 101, Psych 205, Principles of Behavior Analysis, Dick Mlott's book. A student of Linda Hayes named Eric Dubuque was teaching the class, and I fell in love, dude. It was like the first class that I found myself not wanting to skip to go snowboard or like go do something else. Like I wanted to actually study, and I found myself studying on Monday morning. It's this weird kind of existential, in a way, I'm using that air quotes, crisis of me like, oh, what is this? I'm studying and I'm good at something. I'm not perfect by any means, but it was, I guess that's how I found the field, and I guess we can get into the history later, but yeah, I don't know if you have questions, man, but I'm also really into like, where's your background? How'd you stumble in this field? Let's paint that story.
Yeah, man. By the way, Eric Dubuque's a pretty cool guy. He's the president of Kayaba. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Guy.
Yeah. Respect. Hopefully he's listening to this.
Yeah, he's pretty I did a brief stint as the public policy chair for Ohio's Alba, and he was one of the few people who would actually have a conversation with me and gave me some feedback. So he was a neat guy. Probably doesn't remember me. That's okay. How did I get in the field, or how I found behavior analysis? Wow, man. My journey to behavior analysis is probably a lot more recent than that, as far as like my timeline goes, or later in life than you found it. I went to school at Ohio State, and I guess I grew up a pretty good student, junior high and high school and stuff. I graduated with a pretty decent GPA. I was a multi-letter athlete type guy. I was clean living type kid.
Yeah.
I went to college and lost my mind and did exactly the opposite. And, joined a fraternity and kind of went from there. I kind of floated around. I majored in philosophy and political science because I like to think about cool stuff and whatever, and kind of floated around after college. I really didn't have a big purpose. I ended up selling cars, and that was soul crushing to the extreme, to say the least. Everything people say about selling cars is all that and then some. Had a small mishap, with the law, and met a guy who happened to work with kids who also had a small mishap with the law. And, I wanted to get out of that and find a new way to go about living my life and doing things. I wanted to start fresh. And I took the first $13 an hour job I could find. And
Nice.
it was working one-on-one with kids. And that's kind of where I just kind of fell into it totally randomly, doing, discrete trial type programming and that kind of stuff. I grew up pretty, as far as like my childhood goes, or like my background in general. I'm half Greek. My dad's Greek. My mom's American. My dad's pretty fresh off the boat. My grandparents brought him and my uncle here like in the late 70s or whatever, and my dad retired young, so we actually moved back to Greece. So I lived in Greece for almost 6 years. Went to public school there, lived on an island, a very small space. My parents separated, we came back, and then my mom's a social worker, so human services kind of runs in my family. Yeah, that's kind of the story of how I got here and how I found the field. It was a very weird comedy of errors and strange coincidences that got me to this point. And
seems like that's most people's description of how they got in the field, right?
Oh, dude, it's funny because I think behavior analysis, like you were talking about, sweat and blue collar, right? I think behavior analysis is like it's like the working man's human services. It's sweaty. You know, I've actually heard Greg Hanley reference this in some of his talks where he's like, you know, this is sweaty work. This isn't sitting back and listening to people talk about their feelings and their problems. Like, to do what we do, it's sweaty. It's with your hands and your mind, you know. And I think that's why I liked it so much too. I think the physical nature of it at first for me was pretty good. It was I needed something to keep my body going as well as my mind. But yeah, most of the people you run into fall into this because, you know, they're floating aimlessly and then they find purpose. And a lot of it starts with autism and disabilities typically, you know.
I was gonna say, did you fall into the severe behavior given your kind of like stature?
Yeah. So you know, I'm being a big person, and you know, I'm sure. And now that I'm in a more lead role and clinical role in life, I think that I get it now. But I was pretty salty about it for a long time.
Yeah, dude,
you know, I made problem behavior, man. My first day working with kids, I was working 2-on-1 with a friend of mine who's actually still a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, if not my best friend. And I got pinned against the wall by a 13-year-old and lifted off my feet. And I'm 6'3", you know. My
first day, I was slapped on the arms and told, "Don't get bit," and that was the extent of my training.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You just have these situations, man. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a weird situation and it was a weird kind of reality. But as far as I think the biggest thing that brought interest to me was understanding and starting to learn the science behind it. I think for me, the interest started with philosophy. I originally got into philosophy because I was really trying to answer some of those big questions for myself. You know, I was raised a pretty religious person and I always had some of those. I always was a skeptic, you know, and kind of a very deep skeptic and never really, none of that stuff really jived. And I never really could reconcile what I saw around the world and what I was told, you know, to believe or how to believe. And I found philosophy, and philosophy seemed to be the pursuit of trying to identify that why. And, you know, it was cool, and it never really answered that for me. And I think it kind of left a hole. It still left me searching for something. And to me, behavior analysis started filling that gap because it's the science of why we do those things, why people do what they do, which is, you know, the podcast you do. Yeah, so that's a big reason why I think I fell in love with, started falling in love with it so much, because you start seeing the patterns of why, you start seeing the connections, you start seeing the causal relations, actual functional causal relations between people and their environment, and it's legitimately predictive.
Yeah,
and
man.
to kind of disambiguate your reality. I mean, it's almost like Neo waking up from the Matrix and learning kung fu for, you know, like,
yeah, dude. Yeah, no, straight up, like. It was when I started learning how to apply it in my own life, that's where I was like, oh man, like I remember thinking to myself, like, this is job security and like life security. Like I could do anything I wanted to do. I would just have to become a subject matter expert to some extent and wherever it was. But like the fact that this, you know, behavior is everything and it applies to everything. Like I can figure my life out. I can figure out where I want to go. And yeah, man, it was like this total explosion of like life and just like looking at things differently. And slowly like this transformation. I had a really good buddy, a mentor of mine named Mark Malady, that described it as like you're going through and you're kind of observing the world and you're like on this balloon. It's kind of floating and it's taking you around. You can kind of see everything. You're like, man, this is cool. Like I get this perspective, you know? And then all of a sudden it's like someone, there's another balloon over there and someone's kind of trying to entice you, like, hey man, you know, drink the Kool-Aid. If you jump over here and grab it, it's gonna be cool, you know, jump over here. And when you fully which I mean what it is you start to read and consume and have like enough experiences in different ways with the field and the different philosophies and approaches, but when you actually grab that balloon and you let go, which was so hard, but when you let go of and it's not that you're going to let go and write it off forever per se, but like for me, it was like, I'm going to let go to formally trying to look at behavior analysis, look through that lens of someone like a radical behaviorist or someone like a functional contextualist, let go, not have this potential dualistic worldview that involves maybe, you know, a 9-to-5 view or a religion or any sort. When I let go of that, what happens is that balloon now raises you to like this whole different perspective. You're looking at everything from a different angle, different lighting, different perspective. And that's what behavior analysis did to me, not only once, but like as I got into the different depths of it, man, like it actually provided that whole different perspective that It's addictive, dude. It's so cool. It's so damn cool.
Yeah. Drinking the Kool-Aid is that's a pretty real thing. Yeah, it is. It does have almost like it does have a religious nature around it. It has almost a supernatural feeling when you think about it. But honestly, I really just think that's the feeling of wonder you get when you fall in love with a science. You know, I don't know if you've read any Sagan, or if any of the listeners are familiar with Carl Sagan. And if you're not, you really need to. He's the first guy who did the Cosmos series. But he wrote this book, Candle in the Dark, right?
Yeah.
Demon Haunted World, A Candle in the Dark. And he just talks about the world, discovering science as a wonder and looking for explanations and finding them actually in front of you that you can touch and feel, and rather than the speculative things that come with some of the other belief systems that are out there that are put to you. So you do have almost like a spiritual awakening, but it's a scientific one. And then you start wanting to learn about other types of sciences too, and you want to start learning about other types of starting to find more concrete ways to explain the world around you, and it just does really change your worldview in a substantive way. For me, the big change happened for me. For me, it really happened seeing the effect, actually seeing the change, like working in the more intensive and severe behavioral situations, like really intensive crisis type scenarios, and seeing people who, for lack of a better way to put it, out of their mind, like just like intense, like murderous,
Yeah.
and looking them go from that level 11 1000, you know what I mean, stage 5 Super Saiyan, to like pretty functional people who weren't dangers to others or themselves anymore. Really made me really took my breath away in a really serious kind of way that made me say, okay, I really need to understand this. I need to understand the nuance behind it, and I need to learn how to apply it across my life, not just in terms of strict behavior management or crisis intervention. That's kind of where it went for me. I don't know, what was the first behavior book you ever read other than the White Book?
So I was introduced to Principles by Dick Mlott, but I was immediately then given. I was given. Yeah, I was given some random articles, but like what you're getting at, like the first one I really dove into and someone gifted to me, it was actually Mark as well, was Beyond Freedom and Dignity. So I was taken off for I got this killer job after my first year working applied, where I was it was in back home in construction. It was Davis Bacon wages. I was a laborer, like the worst guy on the least skilled person on the construction site, making $47 an hour. So Mark got all pissed at me because I was leaving for the summer to go do that instead of working this new passion of mine. He's like, at least read this damn book, like, while you're away. Yeah, that was the one where I started to run into all the actual implications of like this worldview, right? Because I wasn't religious per se. I was raised, there is a God, and you respect that, and he has some sort of control or influence in your life. My dad was raised Mormon, my mom Christian, and so they never really forced us one way or the other at all. They didn't. Not really. They didn't force us one way or the other. We were the family that showed up for a few times a year and for funerals. That was it. And it was sometimes split between where we were going. And I still have to come back and really dive into all the religions and like self-learning, just as like a self-goal of mine someday. But yeah, that's where like Beyond Freedom and Dignity had me rethinking, influences in my life completely. And that was the one. How about you?
I mean, about behaviorism. That was the first one I read. I mean,
Nice.
The one that really grabbed me like for real, the one that like changed the way I think about stuff was definitely Science Human Behavior. But I mean, like About Behaviorism was the first one I read, and that was pretty early on. But
Yeah. Radical behaviorism had a big impact on me as well. But that was like later on and like helping me kind of refine, and I had already gone through most of the internal struggles myself and like talked to people about them.
Yeah, I have to say that for me, it was really not initially. I just really wanted to be an authentic clinician. Like I was very obsessed with just learning how to use it as like a Jedi mind trick and like, as a skill, as a skill path. It was not really about the philosophy and stuff. I think now the last, 3 or 4 years, as I've progressed in my career and my journey on this ride, I've gotten a lot more into the philosophical implications of behavior analysis and behaviorism, and kind of what that means for my worldview and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely. It was definitely a pretty impact in that way. Do you, what do you think, how do you think that'll change the way you move forward? Do you think, does it permeate other aspects of your life? Which of course we already said it does, but I mean, like, how does it influence them? Do you think it influences your relationships in any way? Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Dude, I did the kind of typical thing when you get super into behavior analysis, is like you get so into it that you don't believe anybody else is right. And you're like the biggest, most pompous asshole in the room of like, dude, I was the guy in my first year of graduate school where the speech department's like, everybody needs to have these visual schedules. And I was like, screw that. I'm going to cut these sons of bitches up and I'm going to use them for tokens. Like, I cut up all the visual schedules and turned them into tokens overnight. And the speech department comes in, after doing all that work and like setting everybody up. And what it was is I was like, the kids that could actually use them and it was functional for, like, cool, but it wasn't gonna be used as a crutch, and like some standard implementation we do when we should be working on totally different, much more functional outcomes for kids that were primed for that sort of thing and like good candidates for it. So yeah, dude, like my first semester as a graduate student, and this was like, it was modeled around me. It's not like this was solely me. And things have changed a lot, but we had a room that was set up for myself and a couple other graduate students to work in with a special education teacher. And it led to, that was the most stressful job I'd ever had in my life. And it was because there was just so much like hate and like tenacity between people, dude. Like, because what it was, yeah, like admin said that, the behavior analysis folks were going to have like complete control and influence over the room. They told the teacher another thing. There was different philosophical worldviews about how things would happen, different practical, things that people wanted to see and carry out and how things were structured. And it led to like overnight dismantling of that classroom, putting children in different rooms, and separating all of us, like, because it was just knock down, drag out arguments that were, there was nothing physical. There was nothing like, directed towards somebody we were trying to like, F you or none of that stuff going on. But it was basically there. So to get back to it, man, like, it influenced me so much to a point where it was just like purely drinking the Kool-Aid, and it became a complete problem in my life. And I had to like work on refixing that. I don't remember your exact question, man. Oh yeah. So since then, dude, okay, fast forward over the last 6 years since that. And I realized, the whole mastering a good conversation and how do you start to slowly influence and people, and, where do you step back and let somebody else talk about, and like, where is other fields' values? Like, I've learned, that same speech therapy. I usually talk about that as an example. Like, I've come full circle and like, I don't anymore, but when I was working in practice, like, I knew when to call a speech therapist and like when to call them in and like rely on them, right? And I started building those amicable relationships. And nowadays, like, I'll invite them out to conferences when we have a topic that needs to be talked about from that perspective, like total 180 on like how I approach those sort of things now. But I've also gotten to the point where I think it's more so like, if you're not ready for a conversation that I want to have, that's okay, right? But like, I'm not going to opt into those sort of things. So like, I date and live with a occupational therapist, and like, we are not going to get into conversations that we don't need to get into unless it needs to be there. And dude, she's rad. She's super pragmatic, right? So I've learned to look at I've learned to like, I resonate with people that are pragmatic in nature. She's one of those people. Anybody that's of that nature, like, that's who I'm going to resonate with, right? And that's what I learned. It was like, I'm not out here to like go out and like convert people into the behavior analytic worldview, right? And like, I was almost taught like, what you do is you are this elite person that like knows everything, and it's since completely been taken down to and put in check on if someone wants to have a conversation, right? Like I will jump into those conversations, but and if not, like it's this stuff, dude. Like create it, put it out there, see if it resonates with people. But how about you, dude? How was your?
It's almost I'm almost the opposite, man. I'm still kind of in that fight or flight phase. I guess it's not really about proselytizing, which I think is what you're talking about, like going out and preaching the word.
Yeah,
But it is for me. I'm pretty uncompromising when it comes to certain things.
yeah,
I believe in, respect and dignity towards your fellow professionals and collegial relationships and interdisciplinary teams and all that stuff. But on the flip side too, I also think everyone should know their lanes and everyone should know I don't know. I'm a staunch scientist, man. Like if it's not
yeah,
pragmatic, if it's not true,
yeah. Well,
my commitment to truth, and maybe that'll be an awesome conversation in the comments. People are like, oh, what is truth? Well,
yeah, that is a topic I want to talk about sometime.
yeah, take every guy who's asked himself that question a bunch. We can do that if you'd like.
Oh yeah,
Truth is what you see and what you can touch and what you can prove. But anyway, if you can't prove it, and you fighting for it, I have no interest in it. And I do believe in using all the tools of debate and dialectic and rhetoric at our disposal as logical, thinking, critical beings to win arguments. Because when it boils down to it, if I inherited anything from anyone, I inherited a competitive edge and competitive spirit that is most likely counterproductive in many instances.
Dude, and
winning means everything.
I was raised that way in the field by a few select mentors, not by all of them. And I love it, dude. Like I just had to learn to myself. Like I feel like I achieve my goals better if I learn when to turn it on and turn it off. This point of this podcast is to turn it on more. Like, I can tell you, like you're there too. But
for me, I want to learn to turn it off a little bit. Actually, I'm hoping the podcast will put me in a mindset where I can compartmentalize who I'm talking to when I'm talking to them and what philosophical standard I should be holding them to.
Yeah.
Another topic we were talking about is interventionists, versus behavior scientists or scientist practitioners. And what is that?
Yeah.
What's the difference? And I think that at some point in time, I can intellectually say we should have different expectations for them because their individual goals are different.
Yeah.
But I can honestly say from an emotional point of view in my internal dialogue, that's not what I think. I want to believe that, but that's not how I think.
Yeah.
So,
and I wanted to clarify there. Like I hold that line of like pragmatism super strictly when it comes to working in business with other people in the field and like my personal relationships. Like I enjoy conversing and talking with any behavior analyst, anyone that's interested in the worldview, but I will resonate and work much more deeply and spend much more time with anybody who's really, really living like a holistic like approach to like our field, right? Like they are that radical behaviorist through and through, staunch, like and yeah, man, like I just want to clarify, like that is important to me. And
I know, and diplomacy is crucial. I mean, what's funny is that I was bagging on being a car salesman, but it's funny because my mom and I always joke. She's like, honey, one day you're gonna write a book. Everything I ever needed to learn, I learned on a car lot. Well, it's funny how much you learn from people in the world and about people in the world when your entire job is to sit there and have them, spill their beans about everything when they're contemplating a $25, $30, $40, $50,000 purchase, and then also knowing all the financial in and outs of their life.
Oh yeah,
at a given moment. It really is illuminating, and it's almost the ultimate data set. It's like you become a little single case Google or Facebook kind of data analyst, and your ability to make weird correlations. And that's actually served me very well in my life and my career. So I think that's a pretty valuable skill set that's been taken from that.
Nice.
Well, how about that? What about, have you done any other jobs that have influenced you up until now? Like,
oh yeah, dude, I mentioned that job where I made a shit ton of money. Like I woke up and my bank account was like $2,000 every week. It was insane. That was like not a thing that I thought you did when you're 19. that money, I have never worked so hard for freaking money in my life, dude. Like I have never, not even nothing that I do as a behavior analyst now is like that. You were working 110-degree heat. We were putting oh my God. So we were putting a roof. The thing is, like, it built that tenacity and like that hard work, right? Like you work hard, like is what I'm getting at here. But like I was working at 110 degrees. You were putting a roof on. The roof is lined with like the essentially insulation that you're putting in is in these big rectangular foams. You're using a big forklift essentially to get them up there, and you're laying them down. Now it was interesting in a few ways. Like everything's so thin that if you don't step in the right spot, you will fall through to probably your death. You're gonna fall about 20 feet. Most deaths happen between 19 and 20 feet because you don't do a full circle. You actually do a half flip and you fall on your head. There is some data out there. It's not perfect, but like your probability increases way more than you think. And what's that? Yeah. And you can't see, you have to follow where your screw holes were. So you're relying on your buddies to accurately put where the screw holes are at. If anybody's off by that 6 inches, like your assumptions then fall apart and you may misstep. So like there's that. They had a really strict policy of if you step backwards within 10 foot of any edge, you were fired on the spot. And it was on a secured site where you weren't allowed to look in certain directions or else you were fired. Like it was pretty staunch, man. Pretty cool, hardcore stuff. But what I was saying is we were laying these, as an example, like we spent about 2 weeks where we were just laying down and screwing these things on, and they're lined with like tinfoil essentially. So you're getting hit with 110-degree heat from the back. And you're getting hit in the face with it as well. I drank an entire case of water, 24 bottles of water in a work day, and I did not urinate once. I thought my head should explode, right? Like, I don't know if that's humanly what you're supposed to be able to do. But like the physical, just not torture, like by any means, like by the real, like the physical exertion, that's a much better word, that you had to put out for that was just unreal. And if you paused, you were yelled at, dude. Like you had a certain number of things in which you didn't do it, you were fired, like on the spot. And it was just as rewarding. Like they had a pay for performance system to where if we were able to get a day ahead of the work orders and like what, the progress on the charts, then we were granted I don't remember what it was, like $500 or $800 bonuses for the day when you were doing that sort of stuff. Now, granted, like what you did is you just made them probably anywhere from 10 to 20 times that, probably easily. But yeah, man, like that started with my father and like working out in the backyard, and that turned into like starting the YouTube channel last year, dude. Like I woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning. I edited until 8 o'clock. I went into my job. I came back to the studio and I edited until about 9 o'clock at night. I went home. I went to bed for 4.5 to 5 hours. I got up and I did it again. And I did that for the first 3 months. Largely, like I've got the data on that. It was that history, I think, that was just like, you're gonna fucking work, dude. Like if you want to earn stuff, and I've totally brought that into the field. Yeah. What about you, dude? What influenced you? So you had the car salesman.
I mean, car sales is the big one. I mean, I've done a lot of. I think I was the guy who did every single job on the planet at one point. I mean, but I've worked sales my entire life up until that point. I worked anywhere from stamping out car parts and factory work to selling electronics to selling cars to now autism. Like that was. I've had a very strange, bizarre track. It was trying to find a job that made sense.
Yeah.
Trying to find my path, but they've all influenced me in some capacity, but mostly it's the interaction with people. I mean, especially sales was a big piece of that, and learning how to read people in the moment, adapt, and be flexible in that way, and be fluid and flexible and fluent in my ability to read certain circumstances and react to them. So those are the big skills that I've taken away from them, and also being quick on your feet and that kind of stuff. And that's served me unbelievably in the work that I do now, and getting me where I am. So it matters big time. I think life experience in general does those things, but that's a big piece of the pie.
Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. This is pretty fun, man. I'm having a good time right now.
Digging it, yeah.
One of those things that you find these ups and downs and these lulls, and you don't know where the conversation is going to go when you're saying,
yeah. Yeah, you smash record. I want to do a shout out. Anyone listening, like, give us a little bit of your background if you think it's relevant to the discussion. I want to
Absolutely. How did you
build.
get behavior analysis?
I want to build. Yeah, I
What
want
made you find your passion in this field? What made you find, your zest for wanting to wake up every day and deal with the challenges that go with being a person who works with people?
Dude, speaking of Eric Dubuque earlier, he was the one that was helping me sort out like should I go to grad school or not, amongst two other folks. And I remember him distinctly saying like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to go for my master's in this." And he's like, "It will be an uphill battle every day for the rest of your life." And I was
My
like,
mom told me I would be she's like, graduate school is learning to be a well-trained poodle, honey. All you do is learn is to jump through hoops, which is exactly it, man.
dude, I didn't believe him, and I totally ate those words.
For
Like,
sure.
I didn't tell him that. I was like, sign me up for it, but I was like, he can't be right. Like, it can't be that bad, and it's not that bad in the sense, but it is an uphill battle every day. Life could be so much worse, dude. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
but
Getting into graduate school is super hard for me, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So where else are we gonna go, man? What's the next thing? So we got a couple of different podcasts coming up.
We do.
Kind of just went through our introductions, who we are, how we got in the field. We kind of talked about where we want the podcast to go. What do you hope to learn for yourself from this? How do you think you're going to change, or what do you hope to change?
So, man, I never do thing for just one reason. I don't remember who told me that, but someone was like, never do something for just one reason. First of all, audio, putting it out in this, like we were talking about, this kind of radical honesty. That's one reason. The next thing would be, I'm stoked to get to know you a lot better. This is going to be super fun, man. It has been already. It does not feel like work at all. You just sit down and like, yeah, here we go. That's awesome. And I'm hoping, I'm not relying on this, but I'm hoping that we can keep a momentum up to where people will hop onto this enough or regularly to where I can start to learn from so many different people. You want to take the FA versus the ISKA sort of discussion. I have not worked in the field in a role where you do FAs in about 3 to 4 years. Like, that's not been my day-to-day job. I've been doing OBM sort of work. And so this ISKA train, I've never been a part of it.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to having that conversation. That's my
and that's like I need
functional analysis is my favorite.
Yeah, I read like an article. I read like the core article, like whatever it was, 3-4 years ago at like 1 a.m. Like, I don't remember it. I didn't memorize it. I never practice it. And we all know that reading and implementing something is two different things, right, in this field. So the learning that I'll get from different hosts, man, like if I could like hope for one thing every time, it's like I've had in a way kind of like a whole new perspective after we record each of these. And I get those when I'm talking with people that are really honest and are coming from different perspectives. Yeah, man.
I'm really looking forward to the RFTVB talk, honestly, because that's my weak area. The ISKA FA stuff has been, I feel like that's been my graduate work, and that's been like my obsession for so long, because that's what I do for a living too. But the VB RFT stuff I'm so fascinated by that because I don't understand it. And the more I read about it, the less I know and the less I understand it, which is like super frustrating for me. But that's usually the stuff I start falling in love with, because it's the stuff that I need to wrestle with to really earn the knowledge. I'm really looking forward to learning more about that and getting better at it.
And I just remind me, like, I want to learn how to be someone that cranks out content at like unbelievable rates. I get pointed out sometimes for like, I can't keep up with stuff, but like, I'm not where I want to be. I'm just like shoving so much behavior analytic content out in the world. And so this, like I'm hoping by the end of the year, I've learned how to do those things. And part of that is really focusing on the community who's listening and incorporating them as much as we possibly can. I have so much to learn, I think, on like how do you really, like, the folks that are listening to this, like, how can we all like make this thing collectively as successful as possible? And like an example of that would be in the video realm last year, I had posted that we were going to have like a 20-hour layover in Beirut in Lebanon. myself and Megan Miller, when we were over traveling. And I had an email the next morning in my inbox with someone that had grown up there, was a behavior analyst, since came over to the States for about 20 years, and said, I know everyone that's doing things over there. If you'd like, I'd like to just have them pick you up from the airport, show you everything you need to see in those 20 hours. And like, that was stuff where that's a perfect example of like, if I can create something that's useful for them, but they can also help me out in those senses, right? Like if we can work together and somehow like showing this world like what we got to offer, like that'd be so cool. So it led to a great experience for me, and it also led to them being able to get some, in that case, like some video work that can demonstrate what it is that they're about, what they're doing, that they can host up on their site. And I don't know, it'll most videos live for 24, 48 hours, but it'll be on their site and maybe do them well over the next year. And those are the sort of things that the more I'm learning, I'm really interested in learning on the cultural level, right? Like this small cultural level of behavior analysis, which I feel so extremely lucky to be able to like have the opportunity to work with. And I feel like a lot of behavior analysts struggle with that, myself included. I'm like, it's company culture is a good example. Anyone who's struggling with building their company culture, it's I think an area where we lack largely are the skill sets to be able to be effective, and like we don't know how to necessarily train it when it comes to grad school. Not to mention there's a lot of things to train already, but it's something I want to take away from this. Like look back and be like, hey, I kind of figured out part of the system, on how to work with a community, on creating really valuable content in this case.
Yeah, the community thing is my thing, I think, because I don't, I have a small community, here in Ohio. Like I have, and we're tight knit. I mean, in all fairness, Dr. Holland's like built a group of people who we work great together, and they're wonderful behavior analysts and are like-minded people. But there's only 3 or 4 of us, and I don't meet a lot of other BAs that I get along with. Like I told you before, I do have kind of that challenge connecting with people that are more on that interventionist end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to tackling or connecting with people that are more in the community, that are more philosophically minded, a little bit more interested in bigger problems, a little more interested in creating that kind of sense of connectedness that I feel like is lacking sometimes in the field, or just lacking in general in human services. So, in education. So yeah, the community piece is going to be a big thing for me too. I want to meet some people and learn. Learning is going to be a big piece across the board. I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. And it's always been one of my things. One of my life credos is, before I die, I want to be able to say that I learned as much as humanly possible in the amount of time that I had.
Yeah.
I want to hoard knowledge, like that's I'm Smeagol, that's my precious, and I want to hold that. Yeah, I want to eat it all. And this, I think, will be a chance to explore that. And I think an opportunity to sit down and talk to some some big minds that do have a lot of exposure and knowledge and experience will be pretty cool. But I also think a little bit of healthy debate is going to be positive too. I learned, again, like I said before, for me, I'm super competitive. So I learned through combat. I don't know how else to put that. For me, learning is it's war, man. It's a war exercise. It's back and forth. It needs to be critical. It needs to be challenging. It needs to kind of have an emotional bend to it so that it's sticky for me. I'm not the kind of person who just learns from reading. I'm the kind of person who has to read and scream at the book while I'm reading it so that I'll remember it later, because I'll remember that moment my blood pressure spiked.
Some sort of like hack on state dependent learning.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I'm and again, not that that's the goal here, but I mean, like, I want to have engaged discussion. I love that. I thrive on it. And I'm Greek, man. That's what we do. We pontificate. We sit in coffee houses and talk shit to each other all day.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the best thing. It's going to be super fun, and it's going to be a great way to kind of express ourselves. I think that's a good segue for maybe some of the disclaimers about what people should expect.
For sure. Man, I kind of mentioned this before, but like it's an extension of a arm of my business, which is creating media. I ran the numbers last year. I made $3.36 an hour doing this sort of work. So if anybody thinks it's lucrative, like, but it indirectly has value. So just that shouldn't get in the way. I'm pretty good at tacting, identifying those things when they get in the way. But no one's perfect, so when they do, call me out on that shit. But yeah, just know it's affiliated with that.
Wise too. I think just in general, like this is not going to be, it's again, it's not unprofessional. That's not the point. I think that Merrill Winston has, if anyone's curious, shout out to Merrill Winston. He has the best talk on the way people use the word professionalism as a weapon. Absolutely masterful. And I can't even steal his idea because it's almost like the guy somehow downloaded what I was thinking and put words to it, but it's his ideas. But, and it's more like the hope is for this to be, high level and experience, but it's also going to be casual conversational. So, I mean, it's not, it's blue that, we're going to use, occasionally colorful language. We're going to use hyperbole. It's going to be fun and there's going to be jokes. We're going to obviously not intentionally be insensitive or hurtful towards people, but
Yep.
Over the course of conversation, sometimes you say things that if they're misinterpreted, just know that it's all love and it's on you if you want to take it wrong. And if anybody has anything that they want to discuss at any point in time or anything like that, they can always reach out and have a conversation. So that's a little disclaimer that I want to put.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to be pulling segments of this that are video teasers. And the point here is I'm going to get something that seems pretty fun. I'm going to cut it off at the point in which you might be like, where did that end? I might be upset with this, right? Right. Where did that discussion go? So just know, like, I don't know what the end card will be on those videos and stuff, and it's not going to, I don't want to set us up for failure on those sort of things being circulated that way. But the point is this is supposed to, entice people into getting into the full-length podcast. We want to do those sort of things. We want to invite people on. We want to keep these discussions going.
Guests that we'll have, a lot of the standard interview formats don't give you a glimpse into the person. They give you a glimpse into their professional persona and the myth. That's all well and good, and reputation is everything. It's a rule of power, actually. Reputation is everything. Guard it with your life. But on the flip side, though, I think understanding that science is about people. This is the science of people, and and the people who do it. There's humans. There's flesh and blood, and there's thoughts and thinking and feelings underneath there, and they should bring.
And we all, I'd love to go toe to toe with someone on this. Like, we all know, like, that mentor, that person, or that like recent connection you had with somebody in the field was because of those sort of things, right? It wasn't because you saw somebody that was like successful in a company and they taught you some stuff in behavior analysis. It was like like I was talking about, like you had bourbon with them for 7 hours. You were watching history of behavior analysis videos, laughing, going toe to toe on like your beliefs and where you're at, and like that was what I was doing last night. Like it was amazing. And that's how you get to know somebody, and that's the side that I do firmly believe if we start showing that sort of stuff to the world in the right way, we could be taken more seriously in some ways. Data will tell. I've got ideas on how to do this sort of stuff. It's not formally as a part of this podcast per se, but
credit though, like this is also our attempt to really use new media in the way that it's intended to be used, right?
Yeah.
You've already started that path to the daily BA, and I think there's a lot of other great creator behavior scientists out there. But I think that even then, it's really still super highly specialized content. Part of making this very casual, gentle, raw, honest, to your face conversation is to make it open to anyone who's more interested in science, maybe rather than just behavior analysis, to sit down and listen to some people talk about the factual causal relations that affect the way people act out in their world.
Yeah.
Are bleeding into other facets that way too. So I think that's another, it's in my opinion, honestly, it's attempt to disseminate also.
Yeah. And we get into this in a future episode. Spoiler alert, we've recorded a couple before this. The dissemination real quickly is like something's actually being tracked. There's data showing, like, you actually use your science to say, like, look what we've done. And yeah, I agree. It is an attempt at that, but it's not a formal structured one for people that may want to like jump into that and like go toe to toe. We can do that. But Yeah, dissemination itself will definitely be a topic on here. I know who I want to have on that because, yeah, us posting it on the internet and you listening to it may actually end up being dissemination, but a structured approach to trying to disseminate. I'm going to actually take one of those big steps as an attempt doing a short documentary this year, video wise. And like that'll be the first one where I try to like apply everything. But yeah, man, I definitely agree that's a part of it. What else on the disclaimers? Yeah, we might cuss. We might say.
We're definitely going to cuss. Going the last couple hours and only using the word shit was super hard for me. I mean,
yeah.
I was raised in an immigrant household, and my dad curses like a sailor. I mean, so it's super hard for me to contain that. Like, I have to think about the words I'm saying before they come out of my mouth.
Yeah. What else, man? Like, I don't know. This is America. We're going to exercise the right to free speech.
We're going to touch base on controversial topics, that seem to put people head to head in the field. There's maybe some of the legal eagle stuff, which is, all this stuff is covered under fair use. It's covered under the First Amendment, and aside that, it's also covered in terms of if you are a public figure out there. And we do say read an article or a book or even review a video that you've put out there or some type of content. If it's available out in the world, you've opened yourself to criticism, as we are doing this for ourselves.
100%.
So it's fair use is real. Everyone's protected on it. And one thing that's important is that we have no malicious intent whatsoever.
Zero.
Our commitment, I'm married to the truth. That's it. And in some instances, it'll be my truth, but it'll definitely always be sincere and never intended for anything else. So if there's any dispute, we should have that conversation, because to be clear, fair use kind of says, we can say whatever we want if you put it out there, and that's that. And you really can't stop it. So good luck. So that's just a little, this is America and it matters. So like, and as far as like people are going to be super sensitive about stuff, for some of the controversial things too, I would caution you to, put your empiricism hat on for a second and curb the emotional responding. And if you do have a point of view, I would say no problem. Again, bring your point of view and let's talk about it. I think maybe that would make a good topic or episode.
Yeah.
And we want to have as many people who have actually something substantive to talk about on the show, and open it up not just to the big dogs, but open it up to regular people who want to talk about behavior stuff through this platform. So don't get all butthurt and crybaby-ish and poopy pants. Talk about it, and don't start a Twitter, Facebook fire. Okay, relax. But it'll be all good. And so that's some of the disclaimer stuff that I think we needed to put out there a little bit.
Yeah, and like surprise, like this is how the world works. Behavior analysts just aren't used to it in our public sphere. But dude, I was talking with another podcaster today in our field just about the rate of podcasts and like different video channels that popped up. There's gonna be 2019. I'm stoked. We're going to see a lot more of the shit that we saw in YouTube world and the influencer world pop up, dude. There's going to be a lot. It might not all be this year. I think if you're involved with it and you're a creator, you'll hear it through the grapevine a lot more this year. But from everything, dude, like I've got folks that it's at least once or twice a week, I'd say, where folks are like, hey, can you share this? Like, to your audience, like we'll pay X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yo, dude, like that's not the point of this. The controversial stuff where I've literally had a video that I've posted where folks then write in saying like, this is disgusting. Can you pull this down? And it's like, hey, I'm sorry that I said something, publicly. Like, who are you to be able to say what I can and can't do in life, especially as a behavior analyst, right? Like I've got no contract with you. Sorry. Delete email. Yeah, I think so, dude. And I hope we can mature quickly through it. And I doubt we will because we struggle as a field on that stuff. But I would like to try to lead a pretty pro-social approach around to like how we should work together as opposed to, I don't know. I'm going to try to be as like amicable and pro-social as possible.
is critical. Okay. Because, and again, like as we're doing our podcast, you know, we're going to get kind of passionate. And again, like I'm pretty competitive. Like this is probably the softest I've been able to be in a long time.
Yeah.
I'm really relaxed and I'm coming off a vacation and whew, I feel good. But on the flip side, like, you know, there's no room to get offended. You know what I mean? There's no crying in science. Like, stop it. Like, just talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bring it up, let's talk and whatever. And if you are offended, you know, well, that sucks, man. I mean, we're just some morons on a podcast that, you know, we're troglodytes talking on the internet.
We're just a bunch of space dust like you.
if we're affecting your life, like, oh my.
Yeah. Reminder, this is opt-in content. What else? We didn't make a list of these things. I think that's pretty good, man. I want to make sure it's pretty clear where, I mean, we stated, but like if we're off on things, like comment. Like this is meant to be a public forum when it's posted up. On like drop in the comments, like you missed this article, you missed this perspective. You know, like nothing's gonna be perfect. But like the point is, when you create something on the public sphere, that the conversation is then held publicly. So I will occasionally do this with malicious like back channel emails and stuff where I'll just be like, yo, I'm not getting into this unless it's public. So here's the post to go comment on, you know, as a heads up to folks, like I want to learn and progress, but I also don't want to, I think put in the public sphere, we modeled that, put it back in the public sphere. People learn from this sort of thing. And I guess you were talking about like no malicious intent. I 100% agree with that. And part of what I got really burnt by in this field in multiple different places was people not telling me like the real honest truth of like oftentimes politics or like how things worked in our field. And I'd rather just throw that out there and have a record for folks to go find. I don't know what that means, like what we'll be talking about per se, but like the fact that
episodes is going to be a big one like that. I think when we talk about, you know, the field in relation to autism and stuff, I think that could potentially incite a dumpster fire.
Yeah. And
I think that, you know,
and like these, like you were saying, like these things have been talked about forever. And it's more so like, man, if we could get something out there that kind of puts it in a different medium, helps to expedite our culture as behavior analysts starting to all know the same thing, you know, know this history and kind of talk about it. Like that'd be dope. And that's the goal here.
Yep. Word, man. Dude, that's great. I think that's a good, I think we're hitting our stopping point here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we are, man. This is probably the only thing I'm gonna have to edit since I paused so long.
I mean, that was the whole thing. Like do a one shot, like, you know, minimal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of.
I just want to say thanks to everybody. If you comment, say something, our emails, Instagram,
all that. Yeah,
Facebook,
all that's at the end of here. Tell us who you are. Tell us a topic that you would like to be, to see, and just understand the logistics of getting people involved on this is slow. We will go as fast as we can. The intent is a monthly episode. I'm hoping for a lot more frequent. But that's the bare minimum commitment. I've got so many commitments in my life for what I do, that the bare minimum's there, and I want it some time to circulate. I don't think we'll ever, if anything, we'll go twice a month. But yeah,
I feel like we need to have a question for the audience every episode. I feel like let's bring people along. Let's see if we can guide them along their journey, like Sherpas through behavior analysis. So,
who are you?
What's your story, man?
What's your story? And then if you have a topic that you think would be awesome for this, whether you're sorting that out right now and you don't know the answer, or you've like, man, this was a good lesson learned when we started to learn the perspectives of these different people in this area, whether it's a dichotomy or whatever. I want to know what those are so we can start to prioritize. As always, since it's an extension of the Daily BA, the Patreon folks, like I put up polls and more active things in there. So those things will kind of be weighted and influencing the topics a little bit more heavily. But to be honest with you, dude, you catch if you catch our eyes, right? And you say like, this is a topic, this would be dope. If it's something that sounds dope and sounds fun, like that's going to be what jumps onto the show.
This is about fun for me. For me, this is 100% about fun. Like, yeah. So if you're going to make me have fun, don't threaten me with a good time.
All right. That's it. We don't have official sign out. You're going to hear where you can keep in touch with us, where you can actually submit your voice like feedback. Like you can call in. There's a call in option open on this 24/7, believe it or not. That's crazy. But yes, using anchor.fm, you can call in anytime. And we will air those. If you want to keep them anonymous, you can just write anonymous in the text. I'm going to do that for now. If that becomes a problem, we might just keep them all open. But there are some things that we know warrant an anonymous call in would probably be better. So just don't abuse it is my ask there. Yeah, that's it.
Peace.
Later.
All right, please, wherever you found this, make sure that you go in, comment, tell us how you liked it. Make sure you answer the questions that we left there and tell a friend. Please tag, share. It is the way that we can start to break through the barriers and share what behavior analysis has to offer and have these more meaningful conversations in a public sphere. Remember, also, you can go to anchor.fm/the controversial exchange and call in and leave your thoughts there as well, again, privately, where we will be choosing some of our favorites to air on the Anchor app. Now, our next episode is with Rick Kubina. It airs this coming week, so make sure that you tune back in. It is on standardization in private equity and applied behavior analysis. That is that money that seems to be flooding in, those private investors. We have a conversation around this for about an hour and a half. Now, I have a quick fun fact for you. That is, did you know that 1 in 1,300 people, that's right, in 2018, 1 in 1,300 people that actually tuned into the content chose to support or help out? So I mentioned Patreon before this. Patreon.com/thedailyBA is a values-based system that I set up to where if you're enjoying this, you can go in, you can support for as little as $1 a month, and you get some sort of exchange as well. So some people receive this in a video series where you could watch online, see us talking back and forth. Other cool things include tiers like the Daily BA, the closed Facebook group where I share other ideas, resources, things like that. Occasionally I get courses, giveaways to hand out to people. We get discount codes that I share with you. I make that super easy to where you can snag some cheaper rates to big events in behavior analysis. And I've paired up with an amazing artist named Lester who makes these just great, phenomenal, really dope posters of legends in our field that we put out there as well. And you can snag some of those depending on your tier. And occasionally I bring on sponsors through this. I make sure that I communicate that with you. And note sponsors, it's only if we truly, truly align on our value system. So that's our show. There are currently over 94 people in the Daily BA Patreon closed group that's accessing these sort of things. I'd love for you to join, so really consider going and checking it out. As a gift for signing up, you get access to all the streams from last year of what we actually produce behind the scenes. You can catch Dimitri and I on Twitter at The Controversial X, that's Controversial EX, or on Instagram at The Controversial Exchange. We will be manning these. We will be answering questions and replying and sharing. So that's how you can reach us in between episodes, in addition to Anchor. And to thank you so much to our listeners. You are the reason that we get to do this. The people on Patreon help us support and make it financially possible. But everybody following, liking, and sharing, you all are helping in this grand vision. So thank you. And I have one last thing that I need to read to you, just so that we're all kosher and we're on the same page. And that is, the views expressed during the Controversial Exchange podcast series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions made in the analysis are not reflective of the position of any other entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity. This podcast series is to educate and inform, provide discussion, and does not constitute professional advice. That's your Controversial Exchange.